But I think we should have a talk about Louise Upston, the Minister for Social Development and Employment, her conversation on Q&A over the weekend. Now, this is a very short clip, this first one, but I wanted to play it to you because I thought it was important for us to actually hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak, what the number one priority for Louise Upston was becoming the new Minister for Social Development and Employment. So this is literally just like a 7-second clip, so you can all hear from her mouth what is the number one priority.
And so that is absolutely my priority one, is supporting more people off the job seeker benefit and into.
There you go. That's all it is. So her number one priority, it's very clear, she wants to state it, so everyone here is getting more people off the benefit. Now, this theme will come back through a couple of times, right? The unemployment numbers went up last week, and we've been told time and time and time again that one of the markers to help get inflation under control is to have more people unemployed. So this is a really important thing to remember. The number one priority for the Minister for Social Development and Employment, number one priority, is to have fewer people on the job seeker benefit at a time where there are going to be more unemployed people. So, logic dictates if there's going to be more unemployed people, but fewer people on the job seeker, I can hear a little man coming, on the job seeker, hey,
I'm your little man. Sorry I'm late, Pat. Late
right,
fee, etc., etc.
We've actually just started, bro. We're just in the very first story. I've just played the very first clip of Louise Upston from Q&A over the weekend telling us that her number one priority as Minister for Social Development and Employment is to have fewer people on the job seeker. And I'm just explaining to people to remember this is a time where unemployment's going up and that for us to get quote unquote inflation under control, we need more unemployed people. So if we have more people who are unemployed, but National wants fewer people on the job seeker, there is a natural conclusion to that. And that is they bump people off it for whatever reason they can. So
it's 1995 again.
It is 1995, like the party like it's 1995. So just so people know, and this is what I've done through the interview, Chewy. So it's not going to take as long tonight. This is a conversation because one of the things that National's bringing back, and she's saying one of the things that National's bringing back is to help beneficiaries get jobs, is the 90-day trials, right? Specifically to do with people on the benefit. So Jack Tame asks her, how will the 90-day trial help beneficiaries find employment? Now, what I've left off the video, Chewy, and I've already told Whānau about this, is the first two times she didn't answer the question. So he's asked the question, she didn't answer it. He asked the question again, she didn't answer it. And then this now is the third time.
Prisoners, as I've talked about.
Doesn't answer the question, though. What evidence do you have that the 90-day trial period is an effective way of doing that?
Any employer that I have spoken to recently who talks about the fact that is one of the issues that stops them from taking on staff. And if on top of that...
Just employer feedback is the evidence you're basing that on.
Which would be called anecdotal evidence.
That's what I'm referring to.
Right. So under the previous National Government, Treasury commissioned a detailed report on the 90-day trial periods. Have you read that research?
I haven't, no.
I went through it. Page 5, quote, this is under the previous National Government.
Yep.
We find no evidence that the 90-day trial policy increased the probability that a new hire by a firm was a beneficiary or job seeker beneficiary.
So expert advice to a national government said that will not work. But remember what this government's about? This government's about not taking official advice. Time and time and time again.
Vibes.
We will not take official advice. And they have an actual answer for this now. And we've heard this word for word before.
Yeah. So Treasury provides advice all the time, as government agencies do. At the end of the day...
What did the authors of that report get wrong?
Well, at the end of the day, ministers make decisions, and I'm really clear. My priority is to support job seekers into work.
Decisions.
This is a report about those trial periods from when National was last in government.
Yep.
You haven't even read it, but the authors say that your point is fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, so there's not one thing that is going to support us getting those numbers down. 190,000 New Zealanders on the job seeker benefit. They're missing out on the opportunities and choices that work brings.
There's no one thing. I think everyone would agree with that.
There's no one thing.
But the report commissioned under the previous National Government that had a similar policy in place said that this one thing is totally ineffective.
Well,
now, another thing you're going to introduce...
I think time will tell on that. And as I say, I am relentlessly focused on how we support people into work. One of the things that I'll be doing...
There you go, supporting people into work. So there you go, Chewy. There's your first starter for 10, mate. Doesn't want to talk about it and refuses to take advice, which is the theme of this government.
Yeah. In a job, if she's in her 90-day trial, isn't she?
No, we don't get to do it with our politicians. Apparently, it's not good enough for them.
Oh, how convenient that they have that carved out. In a job, as part of your onboarding, maybe you had to read a document or two.
Yeah.
To something under your purview of your job, and you can just go, I haven't read it. Don't need to.
Yeah.
Vibes. This government's about vibes.
Well, and it's also about that doesn't suit our narrative. And if that doesn't suit our narrative, we're not going to use it, because their narrative is to get more people off the benefit, even though we're coming into a time where there's going to be more unemployed people. Now, the Labor governments of the past have always been blamed. They've always been accused of the way they did that was they switched people off the jobseeker or the dole and they put them on a sickness benefit. That's what and I'm not even saying that's true or not, but that was always the accusation at Labor. The accusation towards National has always been they just put sanctions on people and cut them off, which is the next part of this conversation. That's called a segue. The conversation about sanctions. Will sanctions on beneficiaries increase or decrease under National as compared to Labor? Again, Jack Tame asked that question. She didn't answer. This is the second time he asked the question.
So will the number of people sanctioned, beneficiaries sanctioned, increase or decrease under your government?
I would expect it will increase. It's a consequence of people not taking actions to help themselves.
And we should note that it's significantly decreased under the previous government relative to the previous National government.
50%.
Yeah. So what evidence do you have that sanctions are an effective way of getting people into work?
Yeah, so exactly that. So we now have 190,000 people on the jobseeker benefit, 67,000 more than 6 years ago. And if we look at the use of sanctions or consequences for people not taking the steps.
We're all kind to each other, and that caused us to get lazier and want everyone else to do the job. That's apparently what happened. That was about it. And Jacinda and COVID and vaccines and tinfoil. That's the reason, I think. All those things.
They need to take to find work. That's 50% more.
You've read the report from the Welfare Expert Advisory Group?
Yes.
Quote, there is little evidence in support of using obligations and sanctions to change behaviour. Rather, there's research indicating they compound social harm and disconnectedness. What did that report get wrong?
Yeah, so there's a range of research, and I acknowledge that.
What did they get wrong about that?
Again, I don't want to beat a dead horse. Advice, expert advice, research, National, la 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 la. That's about as much as they do with it.
Well, as I say, there's a range of views around consequences.
So what was wrong about that line from the Welfare Expert Advisory
I'm not
Group?
saying it's wrong. There's a range of views.
So you agree with them that there's little evidence in support of sanctions?
There's a range of views. They have one view. My view is very clear.
You said you agree with that line.
My view, Jack, is very clear. We have seen an absolute blowing out of welfare dependency under the watch of Carmel Sepuloni and the Labor government. I don't think that's good enough. And I want to make sure, so the traffic light policy that you have referred to isn't just about sanctions. Part of having a system like that is to look at what is the risk that someone is going to be longer term on welfare. So it's also about what additional support do they need.
So what happens if someone gets the red light?
Yep.
The worst scenario, they have their benefits suspended. What happens to them?
So I'm cutting that there for the same reason. She goes through about 60 seconds, 90 seconds not answering that question. And the next clip I'm going to play is actually where she starts to answer that question. So we're tightening up the show. There you go, Chewy. So, how about sanctions that she wants to make sure we're all clear of are otherwise called consequences? And that's what they're saying. Again, 2 lots of no research, doesn't work, not saying it's going to work, and it could lead to people being cut off altogether, which is the next part of the conversation. Yours though, sir.
New Zealand back on track. back to the old ideas at the stale back end of the pantry, and that is the war on the poor. We're bringing it back. War on the poor too, electric boogaloo. We are somehow coming out of a period of record low unemployment. And a lot of that is people that are transitioning between jobs. They're finding jobs relatively easy. And then there's the small hardcore of, for lack of a better word, unemployable. Like, they're people that have been moved off the sickness benefit. They are people that have no skills, mental impairment, drug addiction issues, that sort of thing. Lots of people that need wraparound care that they often don't get. They are not going to be able to go into a job 90-day trial period or not. Now, National want to hold up the 90-day trial period as something that will go, this will mean that an employer will be happy to take a risk on someone who hasn't worked for maybe 8 years. No, because that person that hasn't been working for 8 years, maybe they've had to deal with addiction issues or some sort of mental health or physical injury or that sort of thing. They haven't been in the job market for 8 years. And in front of them is people with more relevant experience that have been unemployed for shorter periods of time. Maybe they just jumped up, off for a job, know that they catch one pretty easy. They're still more employable than this guy, 90-day period or not.
Yeah.
It's not something like they've gone, it's 90-day period for everyone. It's not going, hey, look, we know some of these guys are hard nuts to crack. Maybe for these people, the long-term unemployed, they qualify for a 90-day trial. Doesn't work. It doesn't work. They haven't thought about this. They haven't thought about the long-term consequences of the fact that we are transitioning to out of a pandemic. Businesses are failing. They know that it is record high unemployment, the only record low unemployment. The only way that it's got to go is up, and they're bringing in harsher measures. It is National of the past. It is National of the mean 90s. And it is dehumanizing.
Yeah. Because just remember also, like Bomber talked to us about in that week, his opinion about this, as he refers to them, far-right racist government, Bomber's words, have already got us into a war as an ally of America. That's where we've started. Was that anyone's guess for the start of the year? Sure, you don't know quite what we're talking about tonight, but later on tonight we're going to talk about Brexit, and I'm going to bring some things together to show how the response to Brexit today is going to be like the response to this government within the next 2 years. We'll do that a bit later on, though. Right, let's jump back into this, shall we? So what I've done is I've cut out a big chunk of the video, but the question was, what happens if a person on a benefit goes to that worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is being cut off altogether.
With their obligations.
What about the 12%?
I'll just repeat that in case they cut off. So she's saying that once you get to that worst case scenario, 88% of people sort out their issue. So there's 12% left over who don't. And so that's why Jack is saying, what about that 12%? So 12% of people, no matter what you do to them, will not sort themselves out, no matter what sanctions you put on it. Maybe, Chewy, they're the people you're describing with addiction issues, with mental health issues, whatever it is, who haven't been funneled into the sickness benefit. For whatever reason, these sanctions aren't going to be the way to help them. What about them? That's where he's up to.
Well, that's a consequence. So if you think about the thousands of low-income taxpayers who are assisting to fund the welfare system, they think it's quite acceptable that people play their part.
Yeah.
This constantly gets missed. If you're on a benefit, you also pay tax.
Yeah.
You are a taxpayer. And on a benefit, you aren't on a free ride. You lose some of your benefit to tax. Mm-hmm. I hate when they miss this out.
Yeah. Yep.
To find a job, and that's common sense.
I'm just interested if someone has their benefit card in an absolute worst case scenario.
Yep.
How would they pay to survive?
Well, there'll be a range of options.
Like what?
But the welfare system.
What are those options?
The welfare system
what
is
are those
mutual obligations, and if they are not fulfilling their obligations, then it is quite clear about the fact that the welfare system will not support them beyond that point.
What are their options?
Well, they might go with family, they might go with friends, there might be others that look after them. for community.
Family and friends, except of course the WEAG report quote that you agreed with said there's research indicating they compound social harm and disconnectedness. So family and friends might not be an option.
Yeah, but
what would be the impact
on
the child with the 50% sanction
yep.
on a parent? What would be the impact on the child if a parent had their benefit cut by 50%?
Yeah, so that's why I've proposed 2 additional non-financial sanctions.
The money management, for example.
Yeah, and community
But you still have that option for a 50% cut to a parent beneficiary of the child. So I want to know, in that worst case scenario...
Well, I'm not anticipating that will be used in the same...
That's a kind of stupid answer. That's like, do you remember Nicola Willis saying that everyone who gets a tax cut's going to save it so it won't add to inflation? She didn't anticipate them spending that tax cut. She's not anticipating it ever getting to a point where they're going to be cutting parents off. So then why is it part of the policy? Just don't make it part of the policy. Have other ways of doing whatever it is you need to do. But she's not anticipating that, Chewy.
Just heartless and stupid. So brainless and heartless.
All right.
Yep, and it's used now.
So what happens,
and it was used under Labor.
So what happens to those children?
Well, their families, as I said, 88%, then comply with their obligations, and it's a final resort. It's a last resort. So I don't want to leave the impression that is something that happens very often. So if you look
but it does happen, and it will happen under your government.
It does.
Although she's just said 88% comply. Now she also talked about 190,000 people on job seekers. 88%. Leaving the 12% over is 23,000 people. I'm not saying those are the exact numbers that are going to get to that point, but she said that 88%. That means if it doesn't happen very often, 12% sounds like, 12% is 1/8 of the people on benefits. That sounds like a significant enough number to have a better answer than she's got, Chewy.
It's just monstrous.
And
they're going to damage these kids. The shame that these social services can make people feel.
Yeah.
And if they're going to crash down so hard on people, then crime is an option. Living under a bridge is an option.
And that's it. What I want to do at the end of this is, I know that I want to bang on about Talkback Radio, but I've done this topic a million times, and I'll tell you how I talked about it to my conservative audience at News Talk ZB.
So if you look
but it does happen, and it will happen under your government.
It does, and it's a final step. Yeah. Look, if you think about the work and income frontline staff, they work incredibly hard to support people to do their bit, but there will be some that actually refuse to, and there should be a consequence. And
for their children as well.
That's only fair to tax-paying New Zealanders that there is a consequence.
Is it fair to their children?
Well, as a parent, I think it's really important that parents with children
that's not the question,
take their responsibility.
Is it fair to their children? Yeah.
The option is that they comply with the obligations.
Kids should choose better parents.
They're not.
It's a good out. Kids should choose better parents. That is the response from Jack. And look, I guess let's take a step back. There does have to be some checks and balances through the way. But I guess I think about, put it this way. Let's just say all the stereotypes are correct, and that the right wing are heartless pricks who just want to, vindictively get as many people off the benefit as they can so they can give tax breaks to their wealthy mates. Let's just say that that's true. And let's just say that the left want to do everything they can to, fund people to paint paintings and sit on their asses and play PlayStation and do nothing and just give them all the money that they want. They're the two extremes, right? If you had to pick one of those, I'd much rather pick the one that was looking after people. I'd much rather look after people if they didn't need it than kick people off something if they did. And I think that's why I sit more comfortably in the left than the right, Joey.
Yeah, 100%. I've been there. I've been in that space. I've had parents without work while I've been a kid. I've been a young adult in between jobs. This is one of those things. It's short-term thinking. It's old, dumb thinking, and it's also short-term thinking. If we punch down on these families, with kids, if we give people not a pathway of hope, but a pathway of we're going to drop the hammer on you.
Yeah.
Isn't it better just to make sure that these kids are insulated from this? I don't care if mum never works again, as long as she raises her kids to be functional citizens that go to school. that they're fed, that they learn, that they become functional members of our society, that they do better than their parents.
Yep.
But that is, I guess, outside of the scope of a 3-year term in government, or maybe a 6-year term in government. We don't care, because by the time those kids get older and become a problem, we're not the government anymore, because people got sick of us. It's Labor's fault they're out ram raiding. People don't see the link because they don't think far enough. Teachers and social services scream this from the fucking rooftops, that we have to make sure these kids don't get broken. Because broken kids lead to broken adults.
Which leads to a broken
and this
society.
Heavy-handedness, it's a traffic light system. Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's like, get fucked, live under a bridge and steal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's a benefit to prison pipeline. It is a way to keep the worker scared of losing their job. It is a way to suppress wages. It is economy over people, because those two things, apparently, to National, are mutually exclusive, and they miss the part where the economy is made of people.
Yeah. Yeah, look, and Jack was doing it in that conversation. I can distinctly remember various nights of talkback where I was talking to a primarily old white conservative audience, and there was a story I can actually remember about, a solo mum who lived in a house that was frequented by gang members, right? It was her house. She was had provided for her from the state. It was Housing New Zealand. And the street that was around her was constantly phoning complaints and wanted to get rid of her. And, because that caused issues in the area. And I would just quite simply say on this night to people, and then what? Okay. So we've kicked out this mum with 4 or 5 kids. Now what? And they'd be like, I don't care. Like, well, you can't care because maybe she's in a car at the end of your driveway. Now what? There has to be a what happens next after these consequences go through. And like people have been saying in the chat and stuff, it's like crime will go up, children will be worse off, families will be worse off. And then what? Okay, so let's kick that mum out of her house with her 4 kids and not give her another one. Oh, and cut her benefit because she's one of the 12% that the sanctions hasn't worked for. So she's now got no money, no place to live. Then what? And 4 kids. Like, tell me, then what? And obviously there's no answer to that, which is why if I'm going to err on the side of giving someone a benefit who doesn't need it, or making sure that all those who do need it have it, I would always lean towards the all those that do. I would rather give it to a percentage that don't need it than cut out a percentage that do. And that's, I think, one of the big differences in general between the left and the right. It's like I would rather someone, there's always these questions about, such and such got a tax cut and they were based in Sweden or whatever those things were from COVID, or a COVID payment.
There's always outliers.
Yeah, but it was actually clear amongst those things that the people who needed it here got it, and having to do the admin to cut those people out would have cost more than they spent on the few people who got it. I think it's the same. It's like we talked about last night. It sounds like they want to go to means testing, meaning let's get everybody's story and figure it out and get it. That's going to cost 10 times as much in admin than you'd be paying to have it as a one-size-fits-all, catching some people who maybe don't need it. But that's when the vindictive nature of the right comes in.
Yeah.
Because they'd rather spend more and be vindictive than spend less and allow some poor person to get a benefit that they may not be entitled to. Because if they're the parties of looking after every single one of your dollars, they should be making the decisions that look after every single one of your dollars, but they don't. They make the decisions based around beneficiaries that are the most vindictive because that's what their base wants.